There we lay, as a Bengal tiger when he crouches down, ready to spring upon his unsuspected prey. Each man in deathly silence, with fixed eyes upon the advancing foe, only waiting for the command to fire. Dear friend, these were almost breathless moments. Not a word, not a whisper by the men. Only a word of caution was whispered by the officers. See them advancing. Keep cool, Alabamians. Take good aim, and not to fire too high. They were allowed to come within 75 to 100 yards when the command fire was given. We hurled such a storm of buck and ball at them that it came very near annihilating their command. Hi, my name is Bill Coughlin, and host the First Person Civil War podcast. While the generals of both sides get most of the recognition, the Civil War was fought by the men in the ranks, and they told their stories during and after the war. Follow me as I reveal what these men witnessed in the battles of the Civil War. Episode 55 is entitled Private William A. McClendon and the 15th Alabama at the Battle of Cross Keys, and relies on his book, Recollections of War Times, by an old veteran while under Stonewall Jackson and Lieutenant General James Longstreet, How I Got In and How I Got Out, which he published in 1909. William Augustus McClendon was born on 7 August 1844 in Henry County, Alabama. William lived in Henry County throughout his childhood and was 16 years old when Alabama voted for secession on 11 January 1861. The news of secession sparked the formation of 2 infantry companies in his home county, the Henry Greys and Henry Blues, both of which would eventually be incorporated into the 6th Alabama. Swept up in this wave of enlisting was William McClendon, but his father forbade him to volunteer. Just as a side note, he began every chapter with Dear Friend. Dear friend, no one knew but myself the anguish I bore, the sadness and loneliness that I felt when I was told that I could not go, that I would have to wait until I grew older. Some of my most intimate friends and associates had gone off with the Greys, and there was no enjoyment here for me. To dispel the gloom, I would seek company with what I thought was to be my best girl. On one occasion, I was in conversation with her, talking about the boys who had gone, when she looked at me with a smile, and with a cunning expression of countenance, she remarked that her sweetheart was off with the Greys. Oh my! That was a stunner to this boy, for I had fancied myself to be her favorite, but I found it was all a delusion, and I resolved to go to the war the first chance, thinking it might be the best means of changing her mind, and her affections would be concentrated upon me. Eventually, there was yet another call for troops within Henry County, and William McClendon traveled to Abbeville, intent on enlisting. He eagerly joined, only to discover its real purpose, that it was a home guard company, and he was immediately disinterested and left. That summer, William McClendon discovered that William C. Oates was raising a company of infantry for regular service at Abbeville, and on 3 July 1861, he enlisted as a private in the Henry Pioneers, just 1 month shy of his 17th birthday, and this time with the approval of his father. The Henry Pioneers reflagged as Company G of the 15th Alabama, and by August 1861, the regiment traveled by train to Richmond, Virginia. While in camp, the 15th Alabama formed a brigade with the 16th Mississippi, 21st Georgia, and 21st North Carolina, originally under the command of Brigadier General George B. Crittenden, but only for a short time, and was replaced by Brigadier General Isaac R. Trimble. Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama wintered with the Army around Manassas Junction and stayed there until the spring of 1862. That spring, Major General McClellan began transferring his army by water to the Virginia Peninsula, and General Johnston shifted his army to meet the threat. As the Army of Northern Virginia began its march, Johnston left Trimble's, Taylor's, and Early's brigades along the Rappahannock River as a newly formed division under the command of Major General Richard S. Ewell to guard the capital from the north. By May, this entire division was transferred to the Shenandoah Valley and assigned to the Valley District under the command of Major General Thomas Stonewall Jackson. The Shenandoah Valley was a strategic piece of terrain throughout the Civil War and was seen to intense fighting. As Major General McClellan moved his army toward Richmond, the Shenandoah Valley posed the threat that a Confederate force could march upon Washington, D.C. The Union Army planned to secure the valley with superior numbers and then transfer soldiers east to seize Richmond. With an initial strength of approximately 5,000 men, Stonewall Jackson was tasked with holding the Shenandoah and diverting as much of the Union Army away from Richmond as possible. In what is known today as Jackson's Valley Campaign, Stonewall Jackson relied on speed and concentration of his forces and fought the battles of Kernstown, McDowell, Front Royal, and Winchester. Save for Kernstown, Jackson enjoyed numerical superiority on the battlefield, despite being outnumbered across the entire Shenandoah. Though present at the First Battle of Winchester, Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama posted on the right flank of the Army, which did not see much action. We were all anxious for the Yankees to advance and tried to capture our battery. But instead of advancing, their battery was silenced and they retired. Then came a lull for a time with us, but over on the Winchester Pike near Kernstown, oh my! The battle was raging. As the firing would slack, the more intent we would be in trying to catch the sound of the rebel yell. Minutes seemed like hours, and by 9:30 our doubts were removed. For we were not mistaken. We could distinctly hear the yell, and that was as good news as we wanted. Jackson's division had repulsed the Federal General Banks, and his retreat had become a complete rout. Following the Confederate victory at Winchester, the Union Mountain Department and Department of the Rappahannock attempted to catch Jackson in a pincer movement, but was unsuccessful. As these numerically superior formations pursued the Confederates south, they were divided by the Massanutten Mountain. Stonewall Jackson recognized the threat of these formations combining against him. On 7 June, he emplaced his division around Port Republic to face the Department of the Rappahannock, commanded by Brigadier General James Shields, and sent Major General Ewell's division to hold the advance of the Mountain Department at the village of Cross Keys. On the morning of 7 June, Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama marched to their position, which proved to be approximately a half-mile in front of the Confederate battle line. Once there, they awaited an attack by Major General John C. Fremont, who commanded the Mountain Department. The next morning, we moved on in the direction of Port Republic, but we didn't go far before we passed a church called Cross Keys. This had the appearance of being an old country church, and nearby was a large cemetery with many monuments that marked the resting place of the dead. After passing this church, we halted and remained all day, expecting an attack every moment. But Fremont was waiting for his forces to come up and giving Shields time to move up, and despite Jackson's crossing at Port Republic, while he, Fremont, would attack him in the rear. On 8 June 1862, the Battle of Cross Keys began, with Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama witnessing its opening shots. Company A, being armed with Mississippi rifles, were thrown forward beyond the church and cemetery to act as skirmishers. Desultory firing had been going on all the morning, and from the way that the couriers and staff officers were dashing around, an attack was momentarily expected. We were not long in suspense, for all at once, Company A was attacked with such overwhelming numbers that they had to fire and retreat. They soon came in sight, passing through the cemetery, frequently taking shelter behind a tombstone, long enough to fire and load. When the Yankees reached the opening near the cemetery, they halted for a while. A deadly stillness prevailed in our ranks while we were waiting for the Yankees to come in reach, for we were anxious to get a shot. This was the 60th Ohio and the 8th Virginia, eventually 8th West Virginia, and represented the right flank of the Union Army. Whether it was anticipated or not by the Confederates, Major General Fremont's line began to form to the south and east of the 15th Alabama, which could potentially isolate the entire regiment. With 2 regiments in front of him, Colonel James Cantey, the regiment's commander, reconnoitered his right and discovered this Union line. He promptly returned and ordered Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama to retreat. The colonel came back and called us to attention and gave the command to retire by the right of companies, which we did, moving in quick time through a wheat field. The Yankees, seeing this retrograde movement, advanced through the cemetery and began to fire into our rear, which caused us to change our time of march from quick to a double quick. Zip, zip, zip came their bullets. Whap! And down went Billy Toney of Company K, mortally wounded or dead. There might have been others hit, but I don't remember now. We broke into a run for a short distance until we crossed a fence. During Jackson's Valley campaign, his men became known for their marching speed, so much so that they earned the nickname of foot cavalry. The 15th Alabama was by this time adapted to fast marching and managed to depart its extremely exposed position on the western side of the unfolding battle and marched back to their brigade, posted on the division's right flank, which was on the eastern edge of the battle line. With the Union line fully formed, Major General Fremont began his advance. The main body of the army now coming up, General Stahel, commander of the 1st Brigade of General Blanker's division, supported by the 3rd Brigade, General Boland commanding, entered the woods on our left with the 8th, 41st, and 45th New York Volunteers, and the 27th Pennsylvania. It was this Union Brigade, and specifically the 8th and 45th New York Regiments, that marched towards Private McClendon, the 15th Alabama, and the rest of Brigadier General Trimble's brigade. There we lay, as a Bengal tiger when he crouches down, ready to spring upon his unsuspected prey. Each man in deathly silence, with fixed eyes upon the advancing foe, only waiting for the command to fire. Dear friend, these were almost breathless moments. Not a word, not a whisper by the men. Only a word of caution was whispered by the officers. See them advancing. Keep cool, Alabamians. Take good aim, and not to fire too high. They were allowed to come within 75 to 100 yards when the command fire was given. We hurled such a storm of buck and ball at them that it came very near annihilating their command. Private McClendon claims this regiment was the Bucktails, a regiment known by 4 other names: the 13th Pennsylvania Reserve, the 42nd Pennsylvania, the 1st Pennsylvania Rifles, and even Kane's Rifles. Though this multi-named regiment was indeed on the battlefield and in front of the 15th Alabama, by looking at reports, this regiment was not caught up in the firestorm unleashed by Trimble's brigade. It was the aforementioned 8th and 45th New York regiments the Confederates opened upon, advancing in a second battle line toward Trimble's brigade was Captain Hugh McDonald of Kane's Rifles. After waiting for a short time under cover of a wood, the rattle of small arms in advance showed us where our infantry had engaged them, and directly we were ordered to cross the strip of woods on our right and engage the enemy. The movement was executed promptly, and immediately upon our emerging from the wood, we attracted the attention of the enemy, who threw a few shot and shell at us, one of which struck a member of Company A, 27th Pennsylvania, blowing him to fragments. Unfortunately, there are no reports from Brigadier General Stahell's brigade, so concurrent reports will have to suffice. What is certain is that the 1st Union advance upon Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama failed. After the first volley, we could not see them anymore, in consequence of so much smoke. We fired a few rounds at them through the smoke when it was ascertained that they had disappeared from our front, and we were ordered to cease firing. Other demonstrations were being made on our right, and we moved off by the right flank. We had not gone far before we opened fire on a body of Yankees in the woods on a hill, which put them to flight. Following the repulse of this first line, Private McClendon provides a simple summary of the regiment's advance. Thankfully, Brigadier General Trimble's report provides more context. After spotting a Union battery approximately a half mile to his front, most likely the same battery the Bucktails supported, Brigadier General Trimble notified Major General Ewell of his intention to engage, which was approved. I accordingly in person moved the 15th Alabama to the right flank along a ravine, and, unperceived, got upon the enemy's left flank and his rear, marching up in fine order as on drill. The 15th Alabama completely surprised the force in their front, the enemy's left flank, and drove them by a heavy fire, hotly returned, from behind logs and trees along the woods to the westward. It was in this wood that Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama met Captain McDonald of the Bucktails, supported by the 27th Pennsylvania. We found it already occupied by the enemy and received a volley. We immediately opened upon them, driving them out of the wood at the point of the bayonet. The battery also unlimbered 2 pieces and double-shotted them. But so eager were the men, and so rapid the firing, that I could not rally the men in time to allow the guns to play without endangering our own men. Joining Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama in their flank movement was the 13th and 25th Virginia Regiments, which bested a 3rd Union line belonging to Brigadier General Henry Boland's brigade. This flanking movement disrupted Major General Fremont's battle plans, which resulted in failed attacks upon the Confederate center and left flank. Despite being outnumbered at the Battle of Cross Keys, the Confederates were victorious. But for Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama, the foot cavalry had another battle to fight. We rested quietly that night, and early the next morning, we hastened on toward Port Republic. It was 4 miles away from us, and we went in quick time. Shields had already arrived to dispute the passage of Jackson's corps, his own and Ewell's division. But by strategy at the bridge, Jackson made the way possible, and his division crossed and began the attack. Taylor with his Louisianians had preceded us, and arrived in time to render great service to Jackson in the defeat of Shields. As our own brigade advanced, the booming of cannon and the roar of a severe engagement was going on. Our pace was quickened until we crossed the bridge and marched out into the open plain, where the battle had commenced. We could now tell that the firing was becoming slacker and receding down the valley, the Southerners yelling, which was evidence of victory. The Battle of Cross Keys and Port Republic marked the end of Jackson's Valley campaign. Despite being outnumbered, Stonewall Jackson and his small force were not only able to tie down Union formations much larger than his own, but also defeat them in battle. The Shenandoah Valley was for the time in Confederate hands, and Jackson's command, including Private McClendon and the 15th Alabama, transferred to Richmond to fight in the 7 Days battles. To properly identify the 1st Regiment that faced the 15th Alabama and the rest of Trimble's brigade, we must look at Union casualty reports. The Bucktails reported light casualties, with 1 killed and 8 wounded. The battery they supported, Battery C, West Virginia Light Artillery, sustained 2 wounded, while the 27th Pennsylvania suffered 92 total casualties. Of all the Union regiments engaged at Cross Keys, no one suffered higher casualties than the 8th New York, with 43 killed, 134 wounded, and 43 missing. Major General Fremont confirms the heavy losses of the 8th New York, which began the fighting on that flank. All of this is to say that Private McClendon was correct in his account of the carnage they wrought on the 1st Union line. He only mixed up the Bucktails, who they engaged in the 2nd line, with the 8th New York. The 15th Alabama remained in service until the regiment surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse, with William McClendon still in the ranks as a 1st lieutenant. On the morning of the 12th, our brigade formed and marched 2 miles to Appomattox Courthouse and stacked arms in front of a Yankee brigade, standing at parade rest 20 steps away. After we stacked arms, we went back to camp and received our paroles, and that evening we set out on our long journey for home sweet home. The next day we got plenty to eat, and I felt happy that after so many hard-fought battles, I had escaped and was now on my way home to Mother. I made the trip home on the 7th of May. Oh, how happy I was! Found all well, and Mother looking for me. She was looking by day and listening at night for the sound of footsteps from her only soldier boy. I was not 21 till August. Thank you for listening to the 55th episode. The link to Private McClendon's book is now available on the podcast website, firstpersoncivilwarpodcast.com. On Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn this week, you will find a picture of William McClendon in 1895. Since the 15th of November across these platforms, I have also posted a day-by-day account of Captain Wills as he participated in Sherman's March to the Sea, so be sure to check that out. Following on social media will also keep you in the loop for any production changes, such as the announcement of the delayed release on 10 November. And due to the upcoming holidays, the next episode will publish on 17 December. To help keep the podcast going, please follow the Support Podcast link at the top left of the homepage. Also, like, follow, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use. And on 17 December, Captain Charles W. Wills of Company G, 103rd Illinois, provides next episode's first-person account at the Battle of Atlanta. My name is Bill Coughlin, and thank you for listening to First Person Civil War Podcast.